Welcome and thank you for attending today's webinar, Planning and Producing Exceptional Online Events. With the future of in-person events uncertain in the near term, associations and consortia are facing the challenging decision of whether to cancel or postpone conferences and meetings or to transition them into online events. When we named the company Virtual, it was for a reason. For over 2 decades, we've been guiding clients through the difficult process of producing engaging face-to-face and virtual events that deliver membership value to your community, positive business outcomes, and fully integrated attendee experiences, all leading to the long-term success of your organization. Today, you will hear from a team of experts as they share insights and best practices for online events. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping items with you. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be posted to the Virtual Knowledge Hub and emailed to you. All attendees are in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. However, questions can be asked at any time using the GoToWebinar portal and can be addressed at the end of the webinar. They are encouraged, so please submit your questions throughout. At the conclusion of the webinar, please take the survey and let us know how we did. Virtual Inc. is an approved CAE provider, and this webinar is worth 1 CAE credit. So now let's begin today's webinar. While there are many commonalities between face-to-face events and online events, the differences are important to understand while considering the move, planning, and executing of your event. During the next 45 minutes, we will be discussing the key considerations for transitioning from an in-person event to an online event, including how and when to make the decision, the importance of gathering requirements, creating an engaging experience, and insights from a recent case study. So first things first, let's meet today's speakers.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Stacy Comito. I've been working at Virtual for 4 years. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Communications, and I lead the strategic planning and execution of marketing and communication initiatives for our clients, as well as Virtual Inc.
Thanks, Stacy. Hey, it's Shannon Taylor. Glad to have everyone with us today. I am the VP of Client Services, and I focus on our 30+ professional societies. I've been on this adventure with Virtual for just over 16 years.
Hey everyone, I'm Margot Roger, Vice President of Events and Meetings here at Virtual. I've been with Virtual for 20 years. I manage our team of event planners who work on more than 125 events each year. I'm going to dive right into this content because this year those events are looking a lot different than they did before. Most of our clients right now are in decision-making mode. They're making difficult decisions about what to do for formerly in-person events. For spring and summer events, almost all events have been canceled, postponed, or moved online already. For fall events right now, there's a period of uncertainty. We're working with clients on multiple scenarios, considering in-person events, hybrid events, meaning a potentially smaller in-person event with some virtual components, or an entirely online event as we watch the trajectory of COVID-19. Each of those scenarios create abundance of details to consider, but at the early stages of discussion, it's really important to step back and consider the big picture. First, what is the why? Why are you transitioning your event online? Often events serve multiple purposes for members, attendees, and the industry at large. It's education, it's networking, it's connection. Once you've identified the why of your event, then you can get into the how. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, including the date, the timing, the budget, the tools. The decision to move online is really a strategic one for organizations. By canceling the quarterly member meeting or annual conference, what gap can that create for your members, the attendees, or your industry? And what would that do to your overall member value proposition? Online events become an excellent opportunity to fill that gap. When bringing your event online, you're not simply replacing the event in digital form. You're recreating the member experience and value. So to start creating that member experience and value, the first step is doing your homework. Event planners are notoriously detail-oriented. We love a project plan, we love an Excel file. So this uncertainty of upcoming event landscape has been a real challenge for the way that we typically work. So we're clinging a little bit to our comfort zone and diving into the scenarios with more Excel planning and budgets and timeline. First, we're evaluating all the options for a face-to-face. These are the options I mentioned before. People are canceling, they're postponing, they're anticipating a smaller event with an online component, or they're going all online. Each of those options can have a very different bottom line for your organization. So it's important to consider the financial impact of each. This right now can be changing by the month or even the day. So for example, force majeure may not be in effect one day in your contract, but it could be triggered the next with an extension of a shelter-in-place order from the local organization. So it's important to stay in close contact with your venue and keep an eye on the regional news for your event's location to help assess the financial impact of any decision cancellation or postponement, which is a big component of the financial scenarios that you're working on. So as you build those for the hybrid event or online event, you're also considering the event requirements as well. This looks like a timeline of decision dates and driven by key milestones. The dates can be driven by when those cancellation penalties go up. It could be driven by how much time you think you need to plan your online event, or it could even be driven by what the CDC or World Health Organization recommendations are, or when those expect to be extended. Identify a go, no-go date for your face-to-face based on the ability to pivot to an online event, leaving time to plan and execute. In almost all of these decisions or discussions, the question comes up, can a successful event be held physically without being physically together? Can value still be delivered virtually? Of course, we think the answer is a resounding yes, but it definitely may not look the same as your in-person event did. Once the decision is made to transition online and the financial and timeline scenario homework is complete, there are a few key questions to consider as you design that event. The vision of your online event is a strategic decision that impacts organization, brand, and attendee value. This definitely isn't just another Zoom meeting with the same agenda as your two-day conference. That doesn't always translate well from one medium to another. Several questions have become cornerstones of our conversations as we're going through with clients through this process right now, assessing the event and technology required. First, what value does your in-person event provide to attendees and other key stakeholders in the event? Is it education? Is it networking? Is it brand awareness for the organization? By identifying the value of the event, you can start to sketch out what a sample agenda may look like. Sometimes the value can be achieved through one event, or you may need to break it up into multiple online events, each with a different area of focus and possibly delivery method or technology. Second, what are the goals of the event for your organization? Maybe it's the organization's primary revenue generator for the year, contributing revenue through registration or sponsorship. If so, the user experience and sponsor visibility options become very important as part of that value when designing the event and choosing the technology. Maybe the goal is continuing education for members. If that's the case, content and tracking information should be really a big part of your discussion as you're talking about that technology if certain requirements are needed to be met by local organizations that are providing those continuing education credits. Maybe the goal is to move work or projects forward through workshops or interactive breakout conversations. If that's the case, the technology platform really needs to lend itself to solid interactivity, brainstorming options, and discussion. I mentioned earlier some groups are questioning if their event can even transition online successfully. Again, we think the answer is yes, and the event could look really different. But we're also finding that it can really bring some new opportunities to organizations. For example, you could take a formerly local event to a national level or even global. You can get that speaker from Australia when you couldn't afford their travel fees before in your live budget, or you could increase your attendance to 1,000 when you're not bound to the 500-person ballroom anymore. Removing some of the boundaries for an in-person meeting can lead to more attendance and a new, different experience for attendees, and that's really valuable for your members and your organization. Now, before we move on, we'd love to hear where in the decision-making process your organization is for upcoming events. So we have a short poll we'd love for people to take. Have you recently canceled an in-person event? So the poll's open. If you want to take a quick pulse on that, that would be great. While we're waiting for the poll results, one thing to consider, after identifying the values and the goals, it's really worth pausing to ensure alignment amongst the multiple stakeholders on those value and goals. Like any new in-person event, key stakeholders such as the board or planning committee need to agree on the goals of the event, core requirements, and what is considered success. This takes a lot of communications, meetings, check-ins, and updates with key stakeholders throughout the process, but really goes a long way to ensure a successful outcome. So let's take a moment to check on the poll results. Great. Looks like we have a number of attendees still working their way through canceling an in-person event and determining if they're going to move online. That's awesome. So just a quick reminder, please feel free to contribute questions via the question chat throughout the webinar, and we'll make sure to leave time for those at the end. And thanks all for participating in that. That's great. Good to see. Great. Moving on, in addition to the big picture why, from a practical standpoint, there's also the how. There's deadlines and money to consider. How do you move your event online? What's your budget? What's your time frame? Are the event dates and times flexible? So let's dive into some of those logistics. For some, this starts with identifying the event dates. In some cases, there's certainly merit to staying with the same dates. Everybody's already available. Formerly, travel days can become extra meeting days because you'll want to shorten the hours for the event each day. It's hard to have everybody at their computers for 8 hours or the similar amount that you would expect in an in-person event. One thing to keep an eye out is for original event dates that do fall over weekends. We've had a few cases with that. This may be less appealing with everybody working from home, so just the dates may need to shift a little bit if that's the case, or hours again could shift. Along those lines, you could also consider changing the dates depending on where you are in the planning process. This can give more time to plan and increase attendance. We tend to go with the option that will lead to the most attendance for an event, but it really depends on the organizational priorities as to which they prefer, the original dates or extending. As part of that process, you'll obviously want to check calendars. I don't know, everybody's probably getting a million emails with online events. So it's important to check those calendars as with in-person events for competing events from other organizations that might be vying for your attendees' attention, just making sure that you're scheduling yours accordingly with the new dates. Also check global, local holidays as well. Again, you may be expanding your attendance by being able to have your event online, so there are holidays that could come into play that you might not have considered before. One other thing to note is many people do sign up for events and get the recordings later. So unless your event is entirely live, the calendar may be less of a priority for some. So just consider that as you're deciding what type of content you'll be offering. Time zones is another factor, again, with a global audience. If your event is live, consider where those attendees are coming from primarily and choose the start and end times accordingly. For a diverse audience in many time zones, maybe consider more pre-recorded sessions, or you can run live sessions at a couple different times throughout the day to appeal to different time zones. Just keep in mind that unlike your event at the Nashville Marriott, not everybody is joining from the same time or even day. Finally, budgets. Online events are no different than face-to-face events, and that there's a wide range of options for budget and the attendee experience. This is one of our primary discussion points that we're going through with many clients right now. There's so many considerations for online events from that budgetary standpoint, primarily from the technology and user experience perspective. A lot of the things that can come into play on those particular items are whether you're having live presentations or recorded, what amount of attendee interaction is needed, the need for breakouts and multiple tracks, presentation elements such as virtual staging and graphics, and sponsorship exposure and visibility and functionality needed. Based on these requirements, we're finding costs range from a few $1,000s to much more. So it's really dependent on what your organization is looking for and has prioritized through some of those other questions we talked through, kind of the whys of your meeting. To offset those fees, there's also the revenue side of the equation. The registration and sponsorship fees will likely need to be restructured for an online event, but if you're providing real value to your attendees, this is definitely an opportunity to offset any technology costs. And there's always more conversations. There's conversations about security. What is the registration pathway and how are attendees accessing your event? Is there an API connection to your AMS? How long will you provide on-demand access? For continuing education credits, again, we talked about those being a real value for some attendees. Industry requirements vary, so consider what your industry requires for tracking and reporting, as that will definitely be a priority when looking at technology providers for this event, if that's the case. Finally, sponsors. These can be a big part of the revenue equation, and if so, your event needs to provide real value to them. Visibility options range for different platforms, and you can also get creative with sponsorship packages. You could have track MCs, sponsored videos or content, daily email to sponsors. The options are pretty endless. These are many pieces of the puzzle to transition your event online and consider which technologies to use. It's a constant conversation to refine the goals, requirement, budget, and priorities as you create your online event. But one of the biggest components of an online event is the agenda and content. So I'll turn it over to Stacy with more on creating the event experience.
Thanks, Margot. So making the move from an in-person event to an online event doesn't just mean taking your existing agenda and poof, turning it all online. It means that you need to consider elements to incorporate. So will your sessions be live? Will they be pre-recorded? How many speakers do you have? Are there panels? Are they solo presenters? What is the desired level of interaction? And, will there be video? Answering these types of questions help determine scope, budget, and planning factors for your online event. So we recommend that event organizers take a fresh look at agendas and virtualize it. And what does that actually mean to virtualize your agenda? So for those that know me, that means sparkles and fireworks and confetti, but for most, it means planning with attendees in mind. And especially given the current situations, think about what's meaningful to you. Look at the event schedule. Is there time to pause content so that you can leave, get up from your chair, and go feed your kids? Do you need to watch a session in its entirety? Think about the timing. Are there multiple tracks? What time zone is the event taking place in? And can sessions be watched in demand? Attention spans are much shorter now, so taking breaks is super, super important. Distractions are just a living room away. You're not jumping on a plane. You've got kids in one room and the husband or a spouse in the other room. So keep those attention spans in mind as you're developing these agendas. And also with increased demand for connectivity and bandwidth, video streaming may be difficult with everybody at home. So considering all of this, organizers should plan accordingly and prepare. Putting yourself in the shoes, or in some cases, the slippers, but in my case, slipper Uggs, put your mindset in that of the attendee, and it will certainly make your event more personal and relevant. So let's talk about building agendas that keep attendees in mind. So you can also think of this as, if you build it, they will come. And just like a baseball diamond has 4 spaces, I think that's right, here's 4 things to keep in mind as you build those dream agendas. So first things first, keep it short. Be super mindful of people's attention spans, make things interesting, design shorter sessions over a shorter period of time. Second, produce relevant content. Keep those visuals interesting, make them easy to read, limit the text on those slides. Third, optimize. So people will be joining on various devices at various different times, as not all your participants and attendees will be joining your meeting at the same time. They may be getting popcorn at the concession stand, so may have missed one of your sessions, and having access to those recorded content will prove extremely valuable to all your attendees. And then fourth, embrace the break. Some creative things that we've been doing is hosting a virtual coffee break, displaying a delicious cappuccino recipe, or integrating a sponsored yoga session or meditation time. Unwind after a busy day of presentations with a networking video happy hour, or even for larger gatherings, conduct birds of a feather breakout cocktail receptions where folks can really come together based on their different interest and topics. And really, embracing the break concept is a great opportunity to increase sponsor revenue. And we absolutely should not forget housekeeping reminders. So establish ground rules at the beginning of your event. Remind attendees to stay focused, log off email and IM, silence their devices, and give the meeting their full attention. So over the next few slides, we'll talk about ways to complement that dream agenda by providing opportunities to engage and interact virtually. So encouraging attendees to become part of that conversation is another way to maximize the event experience. In some cases, online events can even prove to be more engaging than traditional ones. Here's just a few different ways in which you can engage your online meeting attendees. Video. So your webcam is your friend, I promise. Don't be afraid of that video. It helps you connect and interact with folks. Live chat, well-facilitated on-air discussions provide valuable interaction for attendees as well as real-time feedback. Polling, as you saw earlier, live polls are a great way to understand your audience and keeping them really focused and engaged. Whiteboards. Whiteboards are a super fun way to collaborate and brainstorm. For example, at the beginning of a session, you could certainly encourage attendees to share something about themselves. As an icebreaker, what did they have for lunch? What's their favorite color? What's their favorite YouTube video they're working on or they're looking at? Be creative and really think about things outside of the box and outside of the norm. You could even arrange for a sponsored happy hour and really thinking outside the wine box. Send your attendees a branded wine glass for them to enjoy, or maybe instead of those ribbons that we use at many of our conferences, spend money on t-shirts that folks can wear during an event that say speaker or attendee, and or even staff. Encourage online interaction just like those ribbons would do. So these are just a few of the things that we've come up with to keep attendees active and certainly engaged. But as everybody knows, attendees are only one side of the equation, and we certainly couldn't build that dream agenda without speakers. So let's talk about showing our speakers some love as well. So just as you would encourage attendees to interact, your speakers need encouragement too. Presenting from a stage in front of hundreds of people on a general session room is certainly much different than staring at a webcam on one's laptop from your home office. So we've identified just a few ways for showing sponsors some love and providing them some support tips. So slide content, engaging visuals. Advise speakers to limit the amount of content that's on their slides. Design presentations that are easy to read and also engaging. Practice makes perfect. So rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through my notes, I've changed them, I've tweaked them. Encourage your speakers to rehearse. Conduct dry runs on the platform before presenting, and then rehearse again. Bandwidth and connectivity. So ensure that your internet connections are strong. If a speaker's presentation is breaking up just because the kids are streaming digital classrooms or they're watching YouTube videos, it doesn't make for a positive experience for an attendee. And then provide emotional and technical support for your speakers. Be patient. So for many, this is the first time that they're ever really doing an online presentation. They may be used to just going up on the stage and they've got their confidence monitor and they're just sort of winging it. So give them some guidance. Give them guidance on camera angle setup, lighting, audio quality, and appropriate backgrounds. I've got some fresh flowers around. I've got some candlesticks. Making it look really homey, and that production quality really, really matters. Additionally, providing technical support by having a staff member in the room or in each session with them, certainly to make sure that everything is going well and just overseeing any logistics. And then, God forbid, if something goes wrong, they can happily jump up and take the speaker screen and pull down another version of the slides and presentation pretty quickly. And lastly, just help them prepare. just having that go-to person that can make sure that your hair looks right or that you don't have any stains on your shirt, that's certainly helpful. I know I've got my go-to people that I rely on. So speakers should also join about 15 minutes prior to their session starting. And this just allows everybody to get comfortable, work out any of the kinks, talk about sort of overflow. It certainly helps them look at making sure that everything's running smoothly. So effective communication with both speakers and attendees is really critical throughout your event. So what we are advising and recommending is that our clients are developing really a comprehensive communication plan that's targeted at the various audiences and stakeholders, attendees, speakers, sponsors, exhibitors, and those communications should be clear, they should be concise, they should be actionable. You should be reinforcing your message on social media and highlighting agenda sessions on your blog. You should create that one-stop shop for everything, for all your stakeholders, by creating a dedicated microsite. And lastly, it's always important to evaluate how you did with surveys and feedback from all of your stakeholders. But one thing to remember, and certainly not to forget, is just as you would have an on-site event team producing your face-to-face event, your internal communications are just as important. So whether it's a WhatsApp group, whether it's Skype, whether it's text, you need to create that internal back channel to communicate throughout your online event and ensure everything runs smoothly. So by taking your online event online, you have gained access to a much wider audience, you've expanded your content reach, and you've even reduced your carbon footprint. So what happens next and what happens post-event? So we're going to talk a little bit about how to extend the event lifecycle. And by creating on-demand recordings and repurposing all of this great session content that you now have, you can successfully extend your event lifecycle. Session content can be used as a recruitment tool for new members. It can be delivered as an added membership value. It can even be used for lead generation campaigns and sold as potential additional revenue with sponsored content. And lastly, creating into snackable marketing content that you can use on social, you can use for testimonials, you can really use all of that great content and really harness that session content that you've collected as the basis for creating online communications with all of your stakeholders. And it's a win-win for everybody.
Thanks,
Shannon,
Margot.
over to you.
Great. Thanks, Margot and Stacy, for sharing all of your expertise. So let's spend the next few minutes reviewing a real-world scenario that frankly just took place about a month ago. One of our long-standing clients, the Eastern North American region of the International Biometric Society, ENAR for short, made the decision on March 6th to transform their face-to-face meeting to an online event, which was scheduled to start on March 22nd. So pretty tight timeline. This event is an annual scientific meeting that draws over 1,000 attendees. It's spread across 3.5 days. It features 600 individual presentations, over 625 speakers, and there are 12 concurrent breakout sessions. Mixed in with those scientific sessions are the typical poster sessions, workshops, committee meetings, roundtables, and a career placement service. So needless to say, it's a complex event that takes a year to plan. As soon as the decision was made to transform the face-to-face meeting to an online event, it was all hands on deck. Before digging in too deep, though, there were several key decisions that we needed to make quickly with our stakeholders. Decision one was the content, just as we've spoken about previously. We needed to determine the agenda pieces that could be transformed to that online event. The decisions were made in solidarity regarding the sessions that simply couldn't be kept because of either the tight timeline that we were under or in some cases, there was a lack of value in transferring it to an online format. The decision too was timing. Because attendees, speakers, and instructors all had the dates reserved, we kept the original dates and all timing of the sessions to coincide with the current published agenda. So no timing was altered. Decision 3 was, of course, the technology. We decided early on that our #1 goal was to ensure that each live session had a dedicated room operator. With 600 plus sessions and speakers, it was paramount. And we knew that would contribute to the overall attendee experience. After evaluating all of our options, Zoom webinar rooms met our requirements for all of our live and pre-recorded sessions. So then a team of experts from our marketing department, our events team, our client services folks, and our production crew got to work. We literally spent the next 10 days communicating amongst each other to identify roles and responsibilities. We met often, we challenged one another. We wanted to think through every little detail. We asked questions and we challenged ourselves to be creative. We built an infrastructure through a variety of technologies. Obviously, Zoom was one of them. We built a microsite and that all-important back-channel communications. We communicated heavily with our speakers, our instructors, our attendees, and our sponsors. And we looked at our data. Were they getting the emails? Could we see that they opened them? If they didn't, we reached out in a different way. We used the channels that we had available. We tracked all of the nitty-gritty details related to speakers, related to the timing of sessions, all of the nuances with the various sessions that we were keeping. We left no stone unturned. We were looking for a great attendee experience. We planned for the worst case scenario. What if a speaker lost their internet connection, lost their audio? What if a speaker didn't show? What if the internet went down worldwide? In the situation we were in, with everybody starting to work from home, there was no scenario that wasn't possible. We did pre-record a few sessions. We hosted 2 full days of practice sessions for speakers. With over 600 speakers, it was impossible to have one-on-one time and do the hand-holding that we would have liked to have done, but we kept 2 full days, 8 hours a day of live sessions available for all speakers to jump in with one of our room operators, ask questions, and get comfortable. And then we tested and we quality checked everything that was being put into place. Finally, on March 22nd, we were ready to put all of our planning, our building, and our testing to life. Day 1 was a workshop, so it was a smaller number of people. It allowed us to really work through any kinks that were going to come up. It was really nothing that was unexpected. We knew there would be someone with audio issues or someone who was late. The key is, though, we were ready. We planned for those worst case scenarios. We had mobile phone numbers. We had a back channel for all of our 25 plus team members to communicate with one another real time to solve the problems as they arose. Just like a face-to-face event, an online event is not going to be perfect. We were prepared for that. So on the afternoon of March 25th, our event came to an end. It was very successful. We had a happy client, attendees were happy, and we truly were able to offer opportunities not provided during the typical face-to-face meeting. The work isn't over yet. We are still evaluating oodles of data that we collected on the attendees, such as how many unique viewers did we have? How many sessions did they attend, and how long did they attend? A sneak peek of our attendee and our survey data tells us that most, not all attendees, still prefer to meet in person. We did find that they bounce in and out of sessions, and they want the ability to have the sessions available on demand. All in all, we learned a lot of lessons and we grew stronger as an association and a community, and we'll be ready the next time this opportunity presents itself. ENAR online event is a great example of the steps we've shared today in how this can come together successfully. So as we wrap up our session, let's review a few key takeaways. Make an informed and insightful decision to take your meeting online, delivering on your organization's brand promise and those event goals. Prioritize your requirements. Keep in mind your time frame, your budget, and content decisions. Don't do something because you've done it the same for 20 years. Remember those goals, remember that brand promise, and accept that there simply are pieces of your meeting or event that don't translate well online. Create that exceptional experience. Tom Peters says it well. Excellence is the next 5 minutes. Use this as an opportunity to be excellent. Be creative with your technology, your communications, engagements, and interactions of every kind. We appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to turn the control back over to Brooke for questions and additional resources.
All right, great. Well, thank you to our presenters for sharing their insights, best practices, and a recent success story. I'd like to now open it up for questions. And I see that a few have already come in throughout the webinar, so I'll address those. What platforms do we see used most often for online events and meetings? Shannon, I'll pass that one to you.
Yep. The most common question or piece of moving a meeting online is, I just want to use Zoom, or I've already got a platform. And let's think about what we've talked about today. The platform shouldn't be your first decision point.
Agree.
Go back to your goals, go back to your brand promise. What are you trying to achieve? Your platform will come in, right? You're going to find that ultimate platform that fits your goals, fits your budget, and will give you that great attendee experience that you're looking for. There's more out there than just Zoom. When we had the ENAR event, we had a blended approach of platforms and technologies. Yes, we chose Zoom as our back-end product. It wasn't the only technology we used. So there may be a variety of options that you need to consider. The one thing I implore is don't jump to Zoom or go to webinar or something else. Take the time to do your homework first.
Yep. All right, great. We've got another one here. What is the ideal online meeting size? Margo?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think it really depends for the type of session that you're doing. So, for example, for a live or pre-recorded keynote, standalone speakers, kind of the sky's the limit for however many you can, as long as your technology platform supports that number. For breakouts, I would definitely recommend, a smaller number for sure, 25 to 50 for some of those more interactive breakouts when you're expecting contributions and people to speak from each of the locations that they're coming in from. And one thing for those is it's really important to have a facilitator for those breakouts, a really strong facilitator that can help guide the conversation, or at least make sure everyone does get the opportunity to contribute. I think when one of the things that we're actually dealing with, we have a good event right now that we're working on. More people have signed up for the event than we were anticipating, so our breakouts have gotten a little bit bigger. So we're trying to work on a solution for that, and I think it just goes to show you that for online events, I think as with the world right now, flexibility is super key, and being able to pivot and make changes to your current plan is really important.
Great points, Margo.
Absolutely. Flexibility is key.
Yep. We've got a couple other questions here. So what about a keynote that wants to use video? Maybe Stacy?
So, Brooke, yeah, I can take that. So one of the things to think about is having that keynote really pre-record their message. As I said earlier, it is super, super important to rehearse. That way they can test the video to make sure that it works. If there's some streaming issues, there's different ways to also embed the videos and to see what it looks like. But definitely think about if you have a keynote that's using a video or big graphics as part of their keynote presentation, to have them pre-recorded ahead of time.
Great.
We did, I guess, Brooke, one note. We did that with, just so folks know, that worked really well with our ENAR keynote speaker. Yep. She lived in a part of the country that didn't have the greatest internet access. So one of our scenarios was, well, do we really want to take that risk on the live event of her internet connection possibly tanking. And we made that decision that it would be best to pre-record that session. Let's just do it, make sure it's going to be run. And that came into play and it went successfully. She did show up. We had live Q&A, but we pre-recorded the actual session.
And I think, Brooke, that's another example of that virtualizing your agenda and really, making it not just taking your face-to-face event agenda and flipping it to online. You really got to take a look at making sure that all the elements are working.
Great. We got a few more questions here from attendees. So there's two that are similar, so I'll kind of put them together. One is about a pricing model for a registration of a virtual event as compared to a face-to-face event. And then another asks about if there's a basic pricing package template that we could share, or something that their pricing.
Sure, I can take the pricing question. I think in terms of the basic pricing model for registration, I think it really goes back to what you're providing for the organization and the content that's being provided, especially if you've already communicated a price for an in-person event, then it becomes a little bit of a comparison. Like you're having to take a look at what content were you offering for that amount of days, time, content. What are you going to offer online, and what's an appropriate amount for that? So I think you can certainly, for some smaller events, we're seeing some people decide not to charge for their online events. For others that are offering an abundance of content, really detailed presentations and information, it certainly is reasonable to charge. So I would just kind of look at it as a starting point proportionally from what you are offering and compared to your in-person event, and maybe what other components you're not able to offer or are offering in a different way. Same for sponsorship. I think, again, sponsorship is one of the biggest revenue contributors for online event or for events in general. And so it's important to just consider what visibility they will be able to have. There's a lot of different options for sponsor visibility and a lot of ranges. And so you kind of need to know where you're falling on those visibility options before you can set those pricing and packages. So, for some, sponsor visibility could look like logos and a link on your landing page, and that could be fine. For others, if you're getting a huge amount of revenue from your exhibit hall, you may want to spend a little bit more on the platform to get that visibility so you can hold on to as much of that sponsor revenue as possible. Again, the pricing and packages may vary a little bit, but just keeping that revenue is important. So making sure you're delivering on that value is key.
Great, Margaret, thanks. We have some marketing related questions here as well. So the big broad one for you, Stacy, first, that I think is a great consideration. How do you market through the clutter of online events right now? Everyone's thinking about going online. How do you market? How do you stand out?
So I think that the answer to that is be creative and really make yourself stand out. So some of the things that we're seeing is creative subject lines or a real draw into who's doing that presentation, highlighting session content of this is going to be our keynote on blog and social, and getting that word out there, and really being creative. I mean, we had talked earlier about thinking outside the wine box and sending, wine glasses to attendees for them to join a virtual happy hour, or, the T-shirts that say attendee or staff, or even sending them a refreshment break and having a granola bar and water delivered to their house that they can enjoy with a big sponsor logo or something on that. I just think the takeaway is to really be creative, and it should help stand out.
Okay, great.
And maybe for me, add some confetti and some fireworks, virtualize that agenda.
Maybe create a GIF instead of just a banner image, do something wild. Great, thanks, Stacy. We can always count on you for some fun marketing tips. We have another question here, a little bit marketing related, a little more just broad statement related. So this person's organization, they actually have an abstract deadline coming up, and their submissions have been really low. They due to the impacts of the virus, of course. And so how do they communicate with their membership that they are going to host a conference, and that even if it's not on site, that it will potentially be online? Now, she caveats this with the fact that this statement could impact their contractors and the event conference center. So how does she balance that?
Gotcha. I can take a stab at that one. I think one of the first, again, kind of going back to the flexibility that I mentioned earlier, again, flexibility and communication are really important at this time, both with the venues and your constituents or where you're looking for information from. So what we've been doing is doing a lot of, obviously statements on websites and things, letting people know, we're monitoring the situation. We'll let you know of any changes to things. I think you could certainly have some sort of communication about we're considering options for our event this year. Content is more important now than ever. We really need your contributions. Please send us your abstracts. We'll find a way to get them out to our community as we're assessing options for this event. So I think just being upfront and transparent with those members about, hey, we're trying to figure this out. The whole world's trying to figure things out right now. So that's certainly not surprising for everybody. I would also recommend, make sure to stay in close contact with your venue, even if you're undecided about what direction you're going in. Again, we talked a little bit earlier about changes to venues and contracts and deadlines and cancellation fees changing by the day. So if you have a close relationship with the venue that you're working with, that just helps you in the long run. And again, just communication and transparency there help immeasurably at the end. So I would definitely recommend that.
Great, Margot, thank you. So we have another one here. So what kind of support do platforms provide in helping members meet each other like they do in the hallway?
Hey, I saw that one come in, Brooke. Let me take a swing at that one. I think that's an interesting question, and I'm going to answer it twofold. One is again, going back to your requirements and your goals, is networking a big priority? You can pay a little bit of money and get, no hand holding through any service. You set everything up. You can pay a whole lot of money and pay people to do whatever you want. But I think the interesting part about that is this might be an opportunity to get organization volunteers involved, right? Hold those smaller sessions of maybe instead of dinner with strangers, right? It's wine with strangers, and you have a member of your, a significant member of your community, a board member, an executive committee member, a committee chair or lead, facilitate some of those discussions and come prepared to engage with that hallway meeting in a different and more maybe even robust way. So it goes kind of back to that, take the technology sometimes out of it and be creative with your volunteers and with your organization. And eventually, I think what you can do is turn some of these online ideas back towards, when you get to your face-to-face event, why not implement some of these things that you've done online and have more of a creative face-to-face event? So I think I always want to say, take some of the platform out of it and think about creative ways in which you can take these messages and ideas and engage other ways.
Mm-hmm. And Shannon, not to contradict you about taking the technology out of it, but one thing I do want to add to that is you can also use different technology to supplement that. So for example, the platform that you're using for the content online may not have, some of the networking capabilities that you are looking for, but a lot of groups are also still they had a mobile app up and running, ready to go, and they're still using that to supplement that. So there's the opportunity for communicating through the mobile app that might not be available online. So combining those together can kind of create that complete picture.
Yep, good add.
Yep, absolutely. All right, good conversation, ladies. So we've got another one here. Maybe it's a little bit of a softball, but maybe not, Margot. You tell me. So are there specific days that are better for an online event?
I guess I would kind of go back to typically best online event days, I would say, fall in the middle of the week. I think they're, for webinars, for things like that, we've tended to do a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's just, Mondays and Fridays. Fridays are difficult for events for some reason, and Mondays are just everyone's kind of getting their week started. So I'd still concentrate it at the end of the week. I think the bigger thing now, everyone is home. Nobody knows what day it is right now. So that's another challenge. So I think there's maybe a little more flexibility, but I think it's the hours that are key too. Is like you might need to do, but maybe you don't do Monday morning. Maybe you do, 4 hours Monday afternoon if you needed to have a Monday start date, and do like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But just be considerate about when you're starting that. I do think that the weekends are harder to do events on now that everyone's home. I think people are looking for that kind of break from their work if they can. So unless there's a really strong need to have your event over a weekend date, I would probably recommend avoiding that.
And then, Margot, if I can add one other thing, it's really important to have the sessions available on demand, so that if you're home and you've got 2 young kids and maybe during the day you just can't get online to attend that virtual event, but I can very easily view the sessions after I've put the kids to bed. So just having access to that recorded content, I think, is really valuable for attendees.
Great. Stacy or Shannon, so here's a question a little bit on privacy. So what about the privacy of data you're collecting? Shannon's mentioned in her case study that there's oodles of data. Any concerns around privacy? What's your input there?
Yeah, there was another question on the security of Zoom and all these platforms. We aren't sharing any of the data. We're sharing data on just simply views, session attendance, but we're not sharing people's personal data with anyone. I think every organization needs to consider its security practices. And certainly when you're at a face-to-face meeting, you have room monitors. And so before anybody walks into a room, right, that they have a badge that they belong in that room. You would want to do the same thing with your online event. What is the security? How are people accessing the event? Can anyone join? Did they pay? Do they belong? So you want to think of those requirements when you're evaluating your technology.
Great. All right, ladies, I think we will wrap it up here. I will be moving forward here to the next topics. So we hope that you've gained some new insights for planning and producing online events today. We invite you to join us here next week again for our next webinar, the 7 things that standards-based bodies should be thinking about. The webinar will feature insights from our CEO, Andy Freed, our Chief Growth Officer, Greg Kahn, and Alicia Johnson, our SVP of Client Services, on practical strategies that standards groups and tech consortia can use to adapt, not just for today's crisis, but for tomorrow's realities. You can register by visiting the Virtual Knowledge Hub at virtualinc.com. You will find many more resources on association management best practices in the Knowledge Hub as well, including articles, insights, videos, and even a podcast, 5 Minutes with Andy. And on behalf of Virtual and our speakers, thank you so much for joining us today. Please remember to take the brief survey to let us know what you thought about today's webinar. This will be emailed to you in just a moment. And we will be sending you the slides and recording of today when they become available in the Virtual Knowledge Hub. Have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Virtualize that agenda.